Hey, English 10. Happy second week of distance learning. Hopefully the first week went just fine for you guys. Again, let me know if you are having any questions about any assignments. I was getting quite a few emails last week, and that was great. Just keep in mind that we need to stay patient as we work through a lot of these technological glitches or technology glitches. But I think overall you guys seem to be responding pretty well to the things I'm providing you. I wanted to talk with you today about the concept of parallelism in poetry. So I'm going to walk you through this PowerPoint that I've created about parallelism so that you can see what it is and how it works and how you can talk about it. So I'm going to share my screen right now and basically just walk you through the PowerPoint. So here it is. Let me get this full screen. So here we go. So parallelism is basically a form of repetition. You see this a lot in any kind of writing, but in poetry it's used frequently as a means of emphasizing a writer and author's main point. So our technical definition of parallelism is the repetition of sentence structure or word order in order to achieve a rhythmical effect. So if we take a look at any kind of poem, song, spoken word piece, you'll notice that lines or words or phrases will be repeated verbatim as a way to create kind of a rhythm to the poetry as it's presented. So it's used to create a rhythmical effect along with trying to emphasize the main idea of a piece of work. So it can be a single word that's repeated verbatim, word for word. It can be an actual line that's repeated verbatim, like I believe that, I believe that, I believe that. Or in Martin Luther King's famous speech, he says, I have a dream at the start of a variety of stanzas. I have a dream that one day, I have a dream that, so that could be considered parallelism. It could also simply be a grammatical unit. So just a structure, meaning you could have lines, back-to-back lines that begin with an active verb followed by an object, active verb object. So they ran to the store, they jumped, I would say they ran to the store, jumped through the hoop, swam across the river, having that hard verb and then an object or a result behind it. So a word, a line, or a grammatical unit that can be repeated verbatim at the beginning of successive lines or sentences. Think about music, the refrain of a song is considered parallelism because usually you have a chunk of words that's repeated over and over again verbatim after each stanza or after each verse. Sometimes basic lines recur with subtle variation throughout a poem, and that can be considered parallelism as well. So like I mentioned, it's used a lot in poetry as that form of rhythmical effect along with emphasizing points and messages. We hear them in speeches, we hear them in sermons, because parallelism falls into the category of auditory, the auditory piece. Poetry comes, in my perspective, has two forms. You have the visual aspect, which is the figurative devices that you guys worked on last week. And then this week, the sound devices, which are the auditory piece. So in order for poetry to be effective, you have a combination of those two things done well. The visual effect with the metaphors and the similes and the personification so people can see exactly and feel exactly what you're talking about, and then the auditory sense that draws them in with that rhythmical feel. Okay, so that's parallelism. Here's a sample of it at play. This is a poem called I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman. I'll just read it through and then I'll talk you through how this parallelism works. I hear America singing the varied carols I hear. Those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam. The mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work. The boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat. The deckhand singing on the steamboat deck. The shoemaker singing as he sits on his bench. The hatter singing as he stands. The woodcutter's song, the plowboy's on his way in the morning or at the noon intermission or at sundown. The delicious singing of the mother or of the young wife at work or of the girl sewing or washing. Each singing what belongs to her and to none else. The day what belongs to the day. At night, the party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths their strong melodious songs. So as you listen to it, there was a little bit of a rhythmic feel, and that comes through due to the parallelism at play. And if we take it, I'm going to use my pointer here. If we take a look at each of these lines, you'll notice starting Even in the second line, it says, those of mechanics, each one singing. We see the word singing repeated in each line. So that's an element of parallelism, right? So we have all of these things singing. We have this idea reinforced that someone is singing, therefore they probably are having a wonderful time. There's this positive feel to it. So we ask, what is singing? Well, if we look what's coming before that verb singing, each line begins with some sort of job or manual labor job. So the carpenter, the mason, the boatman. We have back here the deckhand, the shoemaker, the hatter, the woodcutter, the plowboy. So all of these more labor jobs are all singing as they do their work. Now this poem was written by Walt Whitman, which means it was written in the mid-1800s during the Industrial Revolution. He was considered the father of free verse poetry and also did a lot of realism poetry. So he wrote a lot about what was going on in America during this revolution of industry. And so what we see here happening is he's writing about all these people who are helping create America and making America this wonderful place. They're all loving their jobs. They're bringing forth their talents to make America this wonderful place. And at the end of it, it says they're singing with open mouths, they're strong, melodious songs. So the parallelism at play is the repetition of the labor job, and then that labor job is singing. So all of those things brought together reinforce that idea of the positivity and the anticipation of the good things that will come as America is growing. The other piece that we can pay attention to in this poem is you notice that there is no hard period until the very, very end. So that last period at the end indicates that all of these people who are working and enjoying their work and working hard are doing it together and in unity. So there's this unification piece at play in the poem as well. Okay, so that's I Hear America Singing. Next one, Shel Silverstein, always a crowd favorite. He's a pretty favorite children's poet. This one's a little bit easier to recognize. The poem's called 1 Inch Tall. So I'll just read it to you and then again, talk to you a little bit about what's going on in it. So if you were only 1 inch tall, you'd ride a worm to school. The teardrop of a crying ant would be your swimming pool. A crumb of cake would be a feast and last you 7 days. A flea would be a frightening beast if you were 1 inch tall. If you were only 1 inch tall, you'd walk beneath the door, and it would take about a month to get down to the store. A bit of fluff would be your bed. You'd swing upon a spider's thread and wear a thimble on your head if you were 1 inch tall. You'd surf across the kitchen sink upon a stick of gum. You couldn't hug your mama, you just have to hug her thumb. You'd run from people's feet in fright. To move a pen would take all night. This poem took 14 years to write because I'm just 1 inch tall. So this is more of a silly, humorous poem, but obviously we see at the very beginning, if you were only 1 inch tall, and then we end the stanza with, if you were 1 inch tall. And then within the stanzas, it's just talking about what life would be like if you were 1 inch tall. So each of those stanzas is sandwiched in that phrase, if you were only 1 inch tall. And this is the third poem I wanted you to look at with my talking. It's called We Real Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks, who's a more contemporary poet. She's still living to this day and writing poetry, but she came to prominence in the 60s and 70s. But anyway, so her poem, pretty simple. It reads, we real cool, we left school. We lurk late, we strike straight. We sing sin, we thin gin. We jazz June, we die soon. So right away, you probably notice that each of the sentences is only 3 words long. So we have that repetitive grammatical structure all the way through, which is an element of parallelism. The other thing we notice is the we word that begins each sentence is actually at the end of each line. So that's kind of an interesting way to write it. And I think with it at the end of that line, the repetitive pronoun we emphasizes the collective or the group. So in this poem, we're talking about a group of people, and specifically, I think we're talking about a group of kids, a group of young people who are kind of out gallivanting around. So we have the we, and then the first word of every line is an active verb, right? We left, we lurk, we strike, we sing, we thin, we jazz, we die. So it's these real powerful verbs. So we have the collective at the end that carries over into this really powerful action that we focus on as we move into each line. So the idea is we have this collective group of kids doing these maybe more rebellious type of activities as we go through, and we see that emphasis in it. And then the result of these activities we have at the end, we die soon. Okay, so parallelism. Hopefully that's making sense to you. What you guys are doing is, I think it's a test question link, but there's a link where you guys need to take a look at this poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. And what I want you to do is identify the parallelism that you see at play in here. So in other words, what is being repeated? Is it a line? Is it a word? Or is it a type of phrase, a wording of a phrase? So identify what it is and then explain how that phrase or that parallelism helps you understand the poem a little bit more, what is being emphasized with that parallelism. Okay, so that's what I'd like you to do for the Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night link that's on Schoology. The second thing you're going to do today is you're going to actually write a poem for me. So you're going to write a poem that uses parallelism. It's a pretty simple task in terms of instruction, but all I want you to do is decide on a topic for your poem. It can be anything. I've had kids write about, well, there used to be a phrase, I just want to be average. And so they had a poem where they used that as their topic, or first world problems, or you could do about Fortnite, or you could do it about Minecraft. I don't know, whatever you want your topic to be, it's wide open. But what you want to do is when you figure out your topic, you're going to decide what's going to be paralleled in there, what's going to be repeated. So maybe you repeat a single word like hope. Maybe that starts out your stanzas, hope. And then after that, you explain a situation that deals with hope. Next stanza, begin with hope, so on and so forth. Or you could have a phrase like first world problems, that maybe you set up a scenario of what a first world problem is, and then your last line of the stanza is first world problems. Move into your next stanza. Set up a scenario and then end it with first world problems. So decide what your parallelism is going to be or what you're going to repeat, whether it's a phrase, a word, a sentence structure, a question even you could ask, and then you're going to craft 4 stanzas of poetry. And within each stanza, you're going to reference that line or that word or that phrase at least once. Okay, so you're going to write 4 stanzas, and those stanzas need to be 2 to 4 lines in length. So you could have 2 lines, 3 lines, or 4 lines in each of those stanzas. And then you have to have your parallelism represented at least once. Okay, so use the poems that are back here as examples. So the 1 inch tall, you can start out with if you're only 1 inch tall, and then you have those examples of what that would be like. The next stanza is the next grouping of words. If you're only 1 inch tall, you'd walk beneath the door. Okay, so that's your assignment. If you guys have any questions, please email me. Give me a call if you want, but I think email is probably the quickest, and I will try to walk you through it again. So that's it. Good luck. Have fun. Be creative. Think outside of the box. Be silly. This is when you're writing poetry, I want you guys just to have some fun with what you're coming up with. Okay, that's it. Have a good time. We'll talk again.